All right, we should start. Here.
Okay.
Let's hide, and then we'll come up. Hey, friends. Yeah, that was a 9 in the morning.
That was a 9 in the morning.
Programmers right there. Yeah, all right, Hanselman, we got for you here. Time jag or jet lag. It's 6 in the morning for me.
It is for me as well.
This is not okay.
And I woke up at 6 in the morning here, so it was actually 3 in the morning when I got up.
Yeah, I got up at 3 as well.
Yeah, so not good.
I've only had 4 of these, so.
So Scott 1, Director of PM.NET. Scott 2.
One of the lesser Scots.
Director of Community. Lesser Scots. The bigger Scott flew out yesterday.
Private jet, probably.
Yeah.
I was in 34B. It's all good, you know, it's Alaska.
Anyways, you know, .NET's changed a whole bunch in the last couple of years. Now you can really build pretty much everything with it. We're going to show a lot today. We're going to show some desktop stuff. We have some web stuff we're going to show, some cloud stuff we're going to show, some IoT stuff we're going to show. So we've got most of these boxes covered, but .NET's really grown over the last couple of years, and you can see that we support all these different workloads. We always like to talk about, customers always ask, is .NET safe? Is it still growing? You can see in the last year, we've added 1 million brand new .NET users to the platform. And when we say active, we actually mean you use the product like you didn't just download it, you actually use it more than once a month.
That's a really important point. We're not talking about, they downloaded it, they said hello world, and then they never ran Visual.
No, this is you actually are in the system multiple times per month using the product. So we do know that's real growth. .NET Core, in that term, is about 500,000 really, really engaged people, over 1 million lesser engaged people.
Okay.
So it's growing really, really fast. At Build, we were showing some .NET Core 2.1 stuff, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that that's available today, and you can grab that right now. And we're just going to quickly recap some of the changes that we had in the 2.1 world. This is always a fun benchmark for me. This is something called Tech Empower, and this is when we were building Core, we wanted to have something that customers could look at and go, why would I choose Core over Java or Node or Python? And we thought that being one of the fastest runtimes would be one of those things. And so you can see here that we gained in 2.1 about 15% in plain performance. We gained 18% in JSON performance, but the big one that we really gained in is database performance, up a whole bunch, and we're still working on these.
And this is really important because it's easy to look at benchmarks and dismiss them. Benchmarks are stupid, right? Let's see how fast we can do hello world, because that's what we all do, right? We're all shipping hello world for our companies, and then they're just doing hello world at scale, because then it's like, you know, Kubernetes containerized cloud scale hello world. Ultimately, though, somebody's got to hit the database, and that's where the real work happens. It's serialization to JSON. It is database access. So it's nice to see ongoing and continued improvement in plain text and JSON, but to go and really do data access and do real work, it's nice to see that we're still.
Can you switch to my laptop?
I can. It is button. I think you're 5. You're not. I think you're 6. There
6.
You go. All right, cool.
So this is the demo that or the benchmark that Scott was talking about. This is a demo that or a benchmark that actually does web, it does APIs, it does database. It's basically doing all these things, and you can see that ASP.NET Core is sitting roughly in number 7 spot here, and that's a huge thing. We used to be way further down that, so we're really, really high in the plain text.
Who is H2O? Should we work to that company? Some of these are theoretical. Some of them are someone's PhD thesis, or there's some people that enjoy doing benchmarks, and some of them are people benchmarking real stuff that you can use.
We like to think that we're the only full stack in here, meaning that supported product, built by a big company that's in all these. But you can see in the plain text, everybody's so fast that everybody's roughly in the top 10.
This is really cool. So let's think about that for just a brief second. Why is everyone around 7 million? Physics. Think about that for a second. I thought someone would get that. I thought I'd say physics and there'd be a pause and you'd go, oh, there's literally only so fast you can go. There's only so much data that can be put on a pipe. There's the limits of physics itself, of which we have maxed out at about 7 million.
Yeah, we have to buy new hardware now because this is running on 10 gig network.
Right.
And so basically, ASP.NET Core can basically saturate a 10 gig network switch to the point that that's all it can go.
As can all of these people at 99%. So once we get a bigger boat, we'll be able to go and go as far
And
as
start working again.
Yeah.
But the one that affects customers the most is this Fortune's benchmark, and you can see we're number 7 here, which is because of that database performance popping back up. So just back.
All right. Which button is 7? You want to go to slides?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
And so this is something we really care about. You're going to see us continue to focus on this in .NET, making our platform the fastest platform that you can actually work on. I just wanted to kind of highlight the things we did in 2.1 since it's just really out a couple months ago.
Oh, actually, if you don't mind, one thing about performance, I'm going to write a blog post soon with some help with the performance team. When there's a perf problem, it is very often you. We get these internal emails about like, hey, I talked to big company whose name you would recognize, and they were really upset because they went to .NET Core and da-da-da-da-da, right? And then here's what we discovered. And these are very dispassionate kind of like post-mortems of situations where they say, well, it turns out that they were hitting the database 10 times when they could have hit it once.
Actually, the most common actually is somebody moves their app to Azure, and they go, man, after you move to Azure, our app is really slow. And they call us and they complain, and then part of our team goes and looks at it, and we're like, well, Scott was being nice. More like 100 database calls per request. And we're like,
there have been issues. Yeah, so those kind of things is that there's great performance tools, there's great profiling tools. You can't just go and take a poorly written app and port it to core and expect it to be somehow a better written app. Use those performance tools. Even my own podcast site that I will use as an example here was hitting databases too often, and a little bit of caching goes a long way.
Yeah. So we'll quickly kind of go through some of the bigger major points in Core 2.1. One is global tools. Scott's going to do a demo of global tools in a little bit. This allows you to install command line tools from NuGet right from the .NET CLI. And it's really awesome. We're going to show a demo with an HTTP REPL using this.
And again, if there's people in the back who are worried that there's no seats, there are lots of seats. Raise your hand if there's a seat next to you, please. So you have no excuses unless you really are just trying to sneak out because you don't know if this is going to be a good session or not.
We showed the performance. A new socket layer was written that increased our performance. We, for the first time in a while, worked on client performance. If you actually want to call an API with HTTP client, we made that 10 times faster in 2.1. We continue to say, as customers want to potentially think about porting their apps to core, we want to bring more APIs to them. So we have a Windows compatibility pack NuGet package that brings a bunch of APIs like system drawing and stuff like that back into the core world for people that want to use those things. In EF, we continue to also bring features from EF that ran on full framework into .NET Core. And you can see we have lazy loading. That's probably my biggest favorite feature of this group. ASP.NET Core, we all are probably aware our browsers now complain if we're not on HTTPS. And so we actually have your development environment always be HTTPS. We did SignalR, so it was the last big piece of ASP.NET that we've actually moved into Core. And we might do a demo of that as well. And we have HP Client Factory, which will be one of the demos I'm going to do in a second. And for the first time, people that have been using MVC for a long time have always wanted to be able to put some of their UI in a NuGet package, like identity and stuff like that. And so for the first time ever, we've actually let Razor actually work in NuGet packages, and we use it ourselves. So we actually inject identity into an ASP.NET Core project using a NuGet package now.
So as an example, sometimes people go, file new website. They go, oh, that's pretty simple. That's cool. And they go file new website with identity, meaning with login and registration and Facebook and Google and da. And then it's like, oh, and there's a bunch of crap I don't want to see. It's suddenly I've got 20 views. Put all of that in a library as a NuGet package, and we actually bring that identity part down. Totally pluggable.
Another thing that happened this week is not only do we have SignalR in .NET Core, but we've now built a Azure service around SignalR. So you can basically take any app that's using SignalR, and you might want to scale it up. One of the biggest challenges a SignalR customer has is they call us and say, hey, I need to scale to 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. And you have to build a backplane and a bunch of stuff like that. Now it's a simple Azure service. You go put it up there. You can develop for free, go into production, and just drag a slider to scale as big as you want.
This is a really interesting problem and a great solution for it. I actually had a small startup on the side that was a SignalR hub that I was using to connect my Windows machine to my iPhone. And my partner and I literally made an ASP.NET website we had like 2 lines of SignalR code, and we were doing all of this scaling work. I had traffic manager. I had multiple DNS in different zones. I had deployed web apps in 3 different locations globally just to route these messages. And now all of that is gone, and it's a slider bar.
So super cool. GA this week, so it's now available. And the next one is I was going to do a quick demo of a Core 2.1 feature. If you can switch me back, Mr. Hansman.
I keep forgetting which one. You think you're 6. There you go.
This app is not an exciting app. It's got an API that says value from API.
That is quite sophisticated.
Very, very complicated app. But what I've done here is I've done something different. Is I wanted to actually test to see if my application is actually robust. So in my app, I've also got some really cool middleware here.
Random failure middleware?
Random failure middleware.
That is lovely.
Because who's actually used an app, and especially phone apps, it doesn't work. Why?
Are you saying that we ship stuff to make it randomly not work?
We don't.
That explains why my iPhone stopped working when iOS 12 came out last week.
So for fun, I'll just run this web API.
All right.
And it'll come up here. I should be able to find it here. Okay.
That's odd.
Thank you, Mr. Hanselman.
Sorry.
So we're going to actually talk. We're going to talk to this in a little bit.
Computer says no.
And you say the computer says no. That's what my random failure middleware does. Is it just makes the computer say no. And you'll notice if I retry this, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it'll fail. So now I want to show you what if you're actually writing an API, you probably do what most of us do. Here's my I've got an index page. It just pulls that API and displays it on the screen. Not super complicated, and it does what most of us would do. I've got a new up, an HTTP client, and I just call it and say, give me the URL. Now, what would I normally do in this case? So I'm obviously, if I run this app,
Okay. This one calls the other.
It's going to occasionally break.
Right, a downstream dependency is failing occasionally.
So how would you fix that? Now, most people would probably do something
Fire this person.
like this.
No, that's the wrong answer.
While values equals null.
Are you literally just going to like just beat on the downstream API until it answers?
And then I would do a retry or something like that.
You could also do that.
And bad programmers only fix it in one place. So it's not fixed throughout the entire app.
Good programmers hide the problem.
So we introduced something called HTTP Client Factory in 2.1, and it lets you solve this problem. So I can go over to my startup class, and I can just do something like services, add HTTP.
This is really true, though. I've actually, in my podcast site, I call a third-party API that is occasionally down. Now, originally, I had perf issues because I'd call that third-party API every time, but then I realized the data doesn't change more than once an hour, so I started caching it once an hour. But then I was finding that I would call it, it would fail, and then it would cache the failure for an hour, right? So what I really need to do is, it's a flaky API, but it's a third-party API that I like. And it's not that it's one ASP.NET app calling an ASP.NET API. It's calling a third-party flaky API, and I can't do anything about it. I want to retry a couple times and then cache it for an hour.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a client factory. This is a collection of HTTP clients where I can set a bunch of policies. And there's actually really crazy ones here, retry forever. I'm not sure why we added that, but
call it insanity.
That's really bad programming. Just beat the crap out of it. And I'll put a number in there, 6. And so what I've done is I basically said I'm going to create an HTTP client, call it API, and I'm going to add a policy saying retry 6 times. I can do a bunch of cool rules here. I could say retry the first time after 3 seconds, the second time after 5 seconds. So you can do back off policies and a bunch of stuff here. But I do it once in my application.
And what's cool about it is that he named it. Can you go to the left if you don't mind?
Yes.
He named it. So he's got one HTTP client that could be, he called it API, that could be flaky API, right? And then the other parts of the app would just go and use the regular one. He can go and have all kinds of policies in this factory, and then he doesn't have to bake that retry code over into the calling location. He can bake it in at the policy level here.
So now you can see that in my method here, we basically inject that. That was added actually in services, so it's actually in dependency injection. And so any controller, any Razor page in the application now can have access to that.
I like this because it kind of feels like model binding, right? And you're just saying like not, you know, from query string or from body. You're saying from services, just go ahead and make one of these HTTP client factories, and then I'll pull the client out.
And so all I did is change my newing up an HTTP client to saying, give me one called API from the factory. And that's all the code I have to change.
That's cool.
And I run the app again. And now as I refresh it, there'll be no errors. 6 is not big enough. But you get the idea.
Do you want to make that forever, perhaps?
I should have done forever. But this is a super cool feature. As I said, HTTP client is 10 times faster. We've got this client factory with a ton of rules in it. Great feature of 2.1.
And that's usually, is that using Poly?
That is using Poly.
And that's an interesting thing to point out also, is that Poly was a really great, you should check it out. It's called Polly. It is a open source project. So we've enabled the using of that open source project in ASP.NET Core rather than us writing it ourselves.
But you know, when we saw that error, I can just be bold, make it 20.
Yeah.
I don't have to change the pages anymore. So it's cool that if I want to go change that, I just change it in one spot. It affects my entire application.
Additionally, if you wanted to load that out of config, you could do that as well. So these policies can be set however you want.
Right.
They don't have to be part of the code.
So it's super cool.
Yep.
Back to slides.
Back to slides.
Okay, .NET Core 2.2. This is a release that we will ship later this fall. Preview 2 just came out about 2 weeks ago. And it's available now. It's on both of our machines, I'm pretty sure. And it continues some of the themes that we have. The big theme that we really care about is you're going to see us focus a lot on making APIs. Visual Studio has been historically great at making graphical applications, whether it's a mobile app with Xamarin, whether it's a WinForm WPF app with .NET Framework, it's primarily or a web app with ASP.NET. It's primarily been UI apps. We haven't really focused on API apps. And so you're going to see a bunch of focus on that, and we'll talk to that as we do a demo. Microservices. Everybody's heard the term microservice. If I put microservice in our title, we would have actually double filled the room probably.
That's true. That is true.
And we want to make sure that .NET is an excellent way of building microservices. And so there's some stuff we're putting in that'll be on the next slide I'll get to, but that's an area we really want to care about. And then performance. You already saw the Tech and Power benchmarks. We're not stopping there. We want to go faster and faster and faster. We want your apps to be the best apps they can be. So let's look at the 2.2 major features. One of these is multi-tier JIT compilation.
Multi-tier JIT compilation. That's very sophisticated.
This is pretty cool. This is where when your app boots up, we can JIT very quickly, so your app starts fast. But as it keeps running,
it gets faster.
It gets faster. So we look at what methods are being called a lot and re-JIT them with a better jitter. So this will just make your applications faster.
That's cool.
Cosmos DB provider. Azure Cosmos is a NoSQL service. And a lot of our developers come to us and say, I don't want to have to use one set of APIs to talk to SQL and a different set of APIs to talk to NoSQL. And so when 2.2 ships, we will have support for NoSQL databases in EF Core built in. Another big one that's been a feature that's missing in SQL in .NET Core is support for what we call spatial extensions. And these are really geometry types. So if you want to do longitude, latitude types of stuff, that's not been in .NET Core. That's coming in the 2.2 wave. We've updated all of our ASP.NET templates with the latest versions of Bootstrap and Angular. The second one is probably one of my favorite ones in the ASP.NET world is, as it is talked about on the other slide, we care about APIs, building APIs. But if you want to secure an API in .NET or .NET Core, it's really hard. You have to create a token server or get a third-party token server. And so we're actually building full security into 2.2, where you'll just be able to actually, right out of the box, create an API, put security attributes on it, and get full security. Finally, we've got support for HTTP2 in core. Really happy about that. And I was talking on that other slide about microservices. You'll see something here called health checks. You have the ability to write code in your application that a application server or something like if you're running in containers, container orchestrators, they can actually call these health checks and say, we're not going to send any traffic this direction because this one doesn't look very healthy.
And you can decide what healthy means.
Correct. As a developer, you go and write the code to say, here's how my app determines whether it's healthy. And we have a Java client coming for SignalR as well. So we'll go to a 2.2 demo, and I think that's going to be you.
Is that me? What are we demoing?
Swagger and the...
Oh, yeah.
So Scott's got an app when he switches to his machine.
I'm thinking. 6, you're 5. Oh, go ahead. Tell me what I'm doing.
And what his app is it's going to be the new style way that a ASP.NET Web API is going to be created. We've actually done demos for years showing NuGet packages like Swashbuckle or InSwag. That's 2 of the popular packages that are out there. Then what those packages do is they take your API and they make it actually submit or give it some metadata. And with that metadata, we can do a lot of things. We can do client generation, so we can actually take your API and build you a C# client or a JavaScript client or a Java client or whatnot for you based on that metadata.
So this is a web API. I'm still getting used to these glasses. This is a web API application, and I'm going to zoom in on...
You're on the wrong screen.
Oh, y'all suck. We'll remove that from... We'll cut that in post. Is that good?
Cut that in post.
Because we do so much post-production on these. Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. This is a... I took the good work done by my manager of this high-quality, scalable microservice that says the word value.
There's actually a different...
And I expanded upon it with an in-memory database.
I'm glad you left the Scott order correct.
I did. No, that's unfortunate. Yeah. There we go.
Before you show the API, though, go show your CS proj.
So we go into our CS proj. I guess you just show what you want, man.
I want you to point out the InSwag there.
Yeah, it is swaggy.
So if you run the application...
So ordinarily, when you ran yours, it said, that's odd, remember? And you got a 404.
Yeah.
So let's go out and do a little .NET run in the right folder. .NET run, we should play music when it, I could maybe do that. Like for that 2 seconds when you wait for the thing to start up, we could do like a little song.
Just boot up the REPL.
I think I boogered it up. You want to do the REPL? But that gets into global tools and that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
All right, if you want to do it that way, just saying.
Well, make your app work first. If not, we can always switch to the manager machine, which will work properly.
Oh, so mean. So painful. What's the URL for Swagger? Might it be that?
If you ran the REPL, it would actually give you the URL.
Dude, you're so mean.
We know that URL is hard to remember, so we actually made the tool do it.
All right, sassy pants. Let me, that's Windows 3.1 File Manager. I don't know why I clicked on that. It's down next to Notepad. It's like, this is a thing, right? It's like, this is what it's like being a Windows 10 developer. It's like Ubuntu, which is crazy that it's on Windows 10. Teams, the Windows 3.1 File Manager. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and unpin that just for safety reasons. So what he's asking me to do, but he's throwing off my whole flow, is there's some tools that I've got, some global tools, and I'm going to install a REPL. Now, ordinarily, when you do a global tool, you say .NET tool install foo-g, and that goes and it gets a developer tool out from NuGet, and it puts it in your path, and it makes it available to you. Now, we've got an HTTP REPL, right? A REPL is read, evaluate, print, loop. It's like when you type, Python, and then you're suddenly inside something, and you can do stuff, and then you get out of it. I'm going to do it like this, though. You notice how I'm saying -- add source, and I'm giving a specific NuGet feed. That's because this is a daily build. It's not out in the regular NuGet feed. That's why that add source is there. It's called .NET HTTP REPL. Okay. And now it says you can invoke the tool using the following command, .NET HTTP REPL. Okay. So that, and the commands can be shorter than that. That's kind of a funky, not easy to remember thing. But certainly I could come up with a better one at some point. Let me go out here, and we'll go here. Okay, we're in here. All right. .NET HTTP REPL. It says disconnected. Okay, so I'll type help, and I could go and say set base, set the base URL. I'm inside of this REPL. I'll say set base, and I think we said it was localhost blah blah blah. Okay. Set base localhost blah blah blah. Now notice that it says using Swagger metadata from this location, right? So it figured out that that Swagger is from there, and then I can go down here, and if I say UI, it took me up to that URL that I couldn't remember, that my boss publicly chastised me for not remembering, which is fine. So then I can go and see exactly what are the operations on that particular API. I can see the values one that we brought over from his API, and then the people's one that I added to. And I can see both the get and post, and then try it out in line. Isn't that cool? So that's bringing in that NSWAG stuff to go and present this, this friendly UI. And that Swagger that is presenting those methods that are available to our web API can then be consumed by Azure API Management or other tools or whatever. Okay? But that's not what's interesting about this here. This is a REPL. It's almost like a DOS prompt for your web API. Okay? So wouldn't it be super weird if you could just type dir? That would be weird, Scott. Thank you. You like that?
Yes.
Am I doing okay?
Doing okay.
All right. What if you could type CD and then hit tab? I love that. I wish I had animated GIFs of some of you, because someone in the first two rows just went like this. There was like a virtual clutching of pearls, and I appreciate you, sir. So now I'm in people, and then I can say get, and I can get the people. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So, like, how far can we take this concept, right? It's pretty cool, right? Because like we use Postman, and that's great. You can use the UI inside of the browser, and that's great. But sometimes you do want to do stuff like this. You want to poke around and explore. What if I could not just get, but also post? Or maybe do all the verbs? So what if I said post, right? So it loaded up an editor, one of the great IDEs, and I could, I'm not, actually someone emailed you about that.
Yeah, I've been emailed about this.
So apparently that's unprofessional. And that was on my review last year because one of you emailed my boss and said that was unprofessional. So I am not allowed to use that variable name anymore. Okay? So that said unsupported media type, right? Because that went and posted some JSON without saying a header, right?
This is actually a bug in the REPL at this point.
But
it should default to JSON.
I would call it an educational feature. But yes, it is a bug. I filed that last night. What I'll do is I'll just say set the header to be application JSON. Okay.
Now you got the 200.
I got the 200, right?
And a get.
There you go. One of our new managers. Isn't that cool? Yeah, that's a really, really cool way to explore stuff.
Switch back to me for 1 second. I want to point out something.
I don't know why I'm having
He's showing all this with command line and VS Code, but really, part of the inspiration for this is the same app he's got. But if I control F5 it in VS, boom. That's not very entertaining for a developer. And so what we're really going to do is we're going to take that global tool and we're going to hook it right up into Visual Studio here.
Okay, hang on. Do that again?
So what I did, let me just go
You
back.
made it a browser.
If I go to Browse With, you're going to see that I've actually added the REPL as a browser in my settings here. And I can go back here and in Browser, I can choose Chrome, Edge, Explorer, but I've got HP REPL set here. And that means now when I control F5 my project, we just launch the REPL, do all the URL stuff that Hanselman did right there as part of launch. And now you can just type ls or dir.
Yeah. And something else that's worth pointing out, and this is, again, this is all being explored, so we just want to know what you all think about this. You see this very subtle little line here that says run, right? Runs the script at the given path, which is literally just a series of instructions. So you could, from the out, there's lots of ways to unit test these things, but you could go and do an integration test right there and run a bunch of scripts, do a smoke test at the command line.
And then, of course, you know, when Scott couldn't remember that URL earlier, we also built that right in here as well.
Yep.
Type a command, in you go. And so you're going to see ASP.NET APIs start having the Swagger built into them, and you'll see us ship in the 2.2 wave this global tool, HP REPL. We'll put it in and hopefully hook it up in the browser list for you automatically so you're just ready to go. If we detect you're an API project, maybe we'll set that as your default browser. And you'll get a great developer experience for building APIs.
Can I show one other thing real quick?
Go.
Okay. That's wrong. All these numbers are mislabeled, so I'm having trouble remembering them. So this is my my prompt, and in my prompt I've got my current branch in Git and whether things are good or bad or whatever, and my blood sugar. That's a real-time prompt of my blood sugar, right? So now that I've got this REPL, I could go .NET HTTP REPL, and I could say set base. Now, we can't detect the Swagger of this because it's not a .NET API. It's, in fact, a Node API. But I can use the .NET REPL to go and explore that and go and get information about my blood sugar live. So it's really a useful tool that you could go and explore.
Yeah, the REPL's not limited to .NET. Swagger is just a common format, or Open API is a common format that's out there that we're supporting. And so you have the ability to add the Swagger Open API metadata to Java, JavaScript, whatever it is. And our REPL will work against that as well. So if you're in a microservice world where some of your microservices are written in .NET and some are written in JavaScript,
yep,
you can use the REPL to talk to all of those things.
Yeah, it's super cool. All right. You want to be on this one or in the slides?
Let's go to the slides.
Okay.
.NET Core 3 update. So at Build, we announced .NET Core 3. And what .NET Core 3 was .NET Core 2, 1 and 2 at this point have been basically focusing on these two workloads, web and cloud. And we announced at Build that we were working on adding desktop, IoT, AI to .NET Core.
Are we also going to talk about global tools?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know when you want me to do that.
We got lots of stuff to talk about.
Okay.
So as we talk about this, we should talk about .NET Framework.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the confusions is, obviously you can see we're bringing desktop to .NET Core. And I got some slides, and I'll talk about why we're doing that. But we just recently had somebody, a post on Medium, I think, talking about .NET Framework. And asking, why is Microsoft doing all this stuff in .NET Core? What about .NET Framework? One of the biggest challenges we have with .NET Framework as a team is anytime we change .NET Framework, we break people's apps. Nothing is worse for me as working on .NET is saying that, hey, this month's security updates or whatever it is, Windows update came with a new version of .NET Framework and broke somebody's app. We as a team are very fearful of that. The challenge is changing any API. There's over 2 billion installs of .NET Framework out there in the world. And when
2 billion?
2 billion. And so you can just think that when an update happens and flows out to 2 billion machines, we have the potential of breaking a lot of apps.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do with .NET Framework is it goes at a slower pace, and we're trying to not break applications. And .NET Core is our version of .NET that moves at a much faster pace. So does that mean that .NET Framework is going away? No, not at all. And just to highlight that, I want to pull out that Office 365, Dynamics, SharePoint, Bing, huge Microsoft services run on .NET Framework, and they won't not run on .NET Framework in the future because porting those applications to Core would take man-years to do, and it's just not worth. It's not worth the benefit for those teams.
And it's also worth pointing out that the .NET Framework, as it is, doesn't support side-by-side. So if we go as fast as people think that they want us, as fast as you think you want us to go, we would break 2 billion people. So we slow down the .NET Framework, you make .NET Core side by side, you allow self-contained builds, which means that one of you could have an application which is a totally custom private build of .NET Core running in a single folder, and that's on one far end of the spectrum, absolute total control of the entire stack from compiler all the way down to the metal, and then the .NET Framework, which is going to move slowly, be reliable, and be something that you could put a decade worth of workloads on.
Right.
And all the spectrums in between.
But we just wanted to address that and say that there's nothing going away. It's just there's two different roadmaps here.
Right.
This talks about some of the .NET Core 3 desktop improvements. So we're adding support for WinForms and WPF. And you might ask, why? Scott just answered why you might want to do this. One of the other common questions people ask me is, Scott, I want to use the latest C# feature. I want to use the latest API. But my IT department will not install .NET 4.xxx until we do a hardware upgrade in a year.
So let's juxtapose that with what he just said about slowing down the .NET Framework. I'm a WinForms developer. I've got a great WinForms app that is running an entire business. I want to use C# 8 or 9 or some new feature. I want the new hotness, but I have a very reliable application. I don't want to mess with it. But you just said you were going to slow down the .NET Framework to be reliable. How do I have the best of both worlds? I want to use WPF, I want to use WinForms, and I want to use the latest async and await and the new keywords that are coming in new versions of C#. How do you solve that problem, sir?
You take those frameworks and you move them on to .NET Core? Not yet.
Not yet. So picky.
You take those frameworks, you move them onto .NET Core, and as a developer, you have a choice. You can be on the fast track with Core and full side-by-side, or you can be on the slow track with .NET Framework.
So I accidentally ran Windows 3.1 File Manager, and I think Windows doesn't get credit for compatibility sometimes. You know what I mean? Like I've got a Mac Mini at home that's stuck on Snow Leopard because somebody just decided, you're fine, and it's been there ever since, right? But I can run like VisiCalc on Windows 10. You know, I can run BBS door games. On my machine here, the idea that I would not want to have compatibility for these applications, these WinForms apps and these WPF apps, is insane. I want these things to work. So how could we make them work everywhere and get all the new features?
Right, and that's where that's the point of this adding this work to .NET.
We swap the brain out underneath, and you put in a new .NET, and does the WinForm app know? Like you've changed its shoes while it's still standing.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, not yet.
No. That's my only job, is to push the button.
Something else that we're going to bring that you kind of hinted to was this precompiled fast startup thing. We're going to give you the ability to make a .NET Core desktop application be self-contained. That means it doesn't require even .NET Core to be on the machine. You basically compile the .NET Core directly into the app. The app will be a little bit bigger, but it means all of its dependencies come with it,
right.
Which means IT doesn't have to change the machine, install something on the machine. It is purely just put an exe on a USB stick, give it to somebody, and it will run.
You've seen us before do that trick. When we first announced .NET Core, we were talking about how important the idea of compatibility and side-by-side was. We would take an ASP.NET app, we'd compile it onto a USB key, and we'd pull someone out of the audience with a Mac or some machine that didn't have .NET Core, and we'd run the app. Now imagine doing that with WPF or .NET or WinForms with total control over what is in that framework.
Something else we kind of glossed over is along the same wave, the .NET Core 3 wave, for both .NET Framework and .NET Core, your WinForm WPF apps will be able to utilize the latest UWP controls. So it used to be, if you want to use any of the UWP features, you had to rewrite your app from scratch. And obviously feedback from customers is, nope, not going to do that. I wouldn't do it.
Well, and what's interesting about it also is that you hear people separating these silos of WinForms and WPF and UWP. They're just Windows apps. We just blur that line a little bit.
Yep.
Use the control that makes you happy.
You can actually run WinForms and WPF in the same app today, and now you'll be able to run controls from UWP in those same apps as well. And so it's kind of, as you said, it's kind of like the one ASP.NET world where we're making one Windows desktop world.
I don't believe it until I see a demo.
We just talked to all these things already. I think all these side by side.
Oh, and the CS project system is worth pointing out.
That's cool. That's the new core project system that is a simplified CS proj file. We'll show that. So I want to talk about, we showed something at Build in May, and you might ask where we are today. In our internal builds, you can now, from the .NET CLI, actually create a new WinForms and new WPF applications. You can actually build and debug these applications inside of Visual Studio. The designers don't work yet. That's a hard piece that we're working on. And we hope to have a public preview, I mean not using internal bits, sometime later this year. So let's do some demos. And I want to start off and just show.
You want me to push the button?
Now you can push the button, Scott.
Just checking. Is that me or you?
I'm going to buy you a thing with a bunch of buttons because you like to press buttons.
I like buttons.
This was a demo that we did at Build, and I just want to start with it because it showed something else as well. So
What kind of app is this?
This is a WinForm app, and all you do is you give it a folder, and you press Run, and it goes and finds all the files in the folder and shows you how big the directories are. That's how big that Build demos is, .NET Core 3 is. So this is kind of interesting because this is using a Telerik control, and we've never compiled Telerik to work with .NET Core.
But what kind of control is it? A WinForms control or UWP?
It's a WinForms control.
It's a WinForms control.
It's a WinForms control.
Okay.
But the point which we were trying to prove was control vendors didn't have to rewrite their controls. It's .NET. And so you can take your assets from your existing projects and just move them in.
Do they even know you did that?
No.
Oh, that's cool. We should tell them.
But what's cool here is if you look at this performance here, it took a second to fill that in. Let's run the same one. This is, you can see here that
So which
now.
one's which, though?
Now it's, it's called a label, a title.
Hang on there, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So .NET Framework on the left,
Can
.NET
I
Core on
add
the
some
right.
value? Anyways, if I run this, the core version of this, look at this. 306 milliseconds. So not only do you get the side-by-side features that Scott was talking about, but core, because we don't have to worry about breaking the world, because it's not globally installed on the machine, we have more flexibility to go update and change APIs that we would not do in .NET Framework because we don't want to break anybody.
When you were talking before about the stuff that happened between 2.0 and 2.1 and the perf improvements, and you can go and read about things like Bing getting a 34 or 37% perf improvement just by going from 2.0 to 2.1. You're on 3.0 now. You're changing underlying APIs like string.this and that and array.this and that. That just makes everything faster?
Should make everything faster. And I'll just close these out and just want to highlight a few things here. Let's go look at the core app. And let's go and edit the CS proj.
Okay.
And you can see I just included Telerik star DLL.
Show us the other CS projects. Those are always attractive.
Yes, let's go see the other CS proj.
The one you can't see because you have to unload it
Oh,
first.
yeah, the one that I can't actually edit.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to show it. It's not worth it.
It's going to make your eyes bleed, though, because it's like 500 minutes long.
But that was showing Telerik, and I thought it'd be fun. I got to be fair to all of our folks out there. And let me find the .NET Core 3. I was goofing around at the office last week, and I built another version of this app. Looks almost the same. Because I really want to highlight this point that this stuff.
We do a lot more demos, too. We gotta get them.
So this one,
Who is this? Those buttons look different.
it's a different app. Does the same thing, thing. Super fast.
Oh, you trade another control.
But let's look at what that is.
I haven't seen.
So what I've got here is I went and grabbed all the controls from my friends at DevExpress and tried to recreate the same demo.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm just showing without even getting a new build from DevExpress.
So you just like stuck them in DLLs and said star.dll for your reference.
I did. Same thing as you saw. Same thing you saw in the other application.
And then you can put all of that into a single folder, and that's you don't have to install anything. You don't have to have the .NET 3.0 runtime on the machine.
Right.
Is that what you want? Are you good with that? Cool. They think that's okay.
I thought I'd do one more thing here, just show that we are making progress, as I said before. Nothing in here. .NET new WinForms. .NET run. So this is an internal build of 3.0. I can now .NET new WinForms.
So does this mean like apps like Paint.NET and all these different apps that are out there using WPF or WinForms, they could get huge benefits by going to .NET Core?
We actually took Paint.NET in the labs as well and got it running on .NET Core without even talking to the Paint.NET authors. Once again, it's just .NET code. So all you have to do is make it boot up on the right engine, and it just goes. I've got one more of these that I will show, and this is .NET new WPF. This one's a little rougher than
the WinForms
the WinForms one, because I'm going to actually have to jump over here. And this will actually be scary. I have to run MS build, and piles of errors will pour out across the screen.
They're really warnings.
They are.
It's a deterrent for the people who aren't bold. Just march forward, sir.
But there is the outlying DLL.
So that's the app that would have been an exe. It's a DLL.
And so this is the first time we got WPF running on Core. This is just really recent. So
very nice.
Thank you. So that kind of highlights some of the things we're trying to do is give you side-by-side, full control of the framework, move faster, take advantage of the newer APIs in .NET Core. And most of your assets should just work. And this will ship sometime early next year. Not early. Sometime next year. Public preview, hopefully by end of the year.
Okay. So we've got about 30 minutes left. We've got this, and then I've got some global tools.
And I have Blazor.
How much time do you want for Blazor?
A good chunk of time.
A good chunk of time? Can I go real fast?
You can go real fast.
Some global tools?
Go for it.
Okay. Wrong button. All right. One of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit briefly, because he wants a lot of time, is the ecosystem that's happening around these global tools, right? We've seen you do .NET this and that, .NET Run, .NET New, yada yada yada. If I say .NET New, there's all these different templates that I can bring in, and he showed .NET New WinForms and WPF, which are templates that were added, right? But I can also say .NET Tools list -G, and these are some of the tools like the HTTP REPL, right? And you can see the difference between the package ID and then sometimes they'll have like a short ID. So like alt cover is a nice open source coverage tool, and then they've gone and made a short command, things like that, right? Well, you can do really useful things with this by bringing in tools from anywhere, like Nyan Cat. I can go like this, right? So like huge amounts of work have been involved to make just the ANSI art work.
You're going to be so much more productive with global tools.
It's true. That's super interesting. I just thought that was awesome, and I wanted to showcase that. But there's some deeply, deeply useful tools that have come out recently, and I just want to showcase some. And this is important because some of you may or may not be thinking about open source. Your company may only do stuff if Microsoft releases it, but I want to show you some tools that are great. Now, currently, these are listed up in not the best place, which is Nate McMaster's list of global tools. We're going to try to put these in the doc somewhere. But you can take a picture of this, this repo here. This is Nate McMaster. He works on the team. If you go to .NET-tools, okay? And he's currently maintaining this lovely, there you go, look at all the people taking pictures like I asked him to. I love that I'm asking you to remember some text, so I'm projecting it on a 50-foot screen so that you can take a photograph of the pixels, and then those pixels go into there, and then you're going to OCR them in order to get, rather than just writing it down on a piece of paper, and that's fine. So this is a list of all these great tools that he's identified. If you've created a tool, you should go and check them out. So let's take a look at a few. So one of them is, one of my favorites is .NET Outdated. Check this out. It's going to look at my podcast project, which includes both a test and a website, and it's going to tell me which NuGet projects have been updated and I should update to. It's going to color them and tell me whether it's a major, minor, or a patch. And then I can go like this. It will go and check to see if those are updated and update the packages for me. And now my project is up to date. There's a test project and there's a ASP.NET Core project. And this is going to be on probably 5,000. There you go. So there's my podcast. And I recently just did an episode of my podcast to talk about global tools. I did a full 30 minutes on global tools and how useful they are with Mark Rendell, who built some great global tools. Now, .NET Outdated is super useful and runs at the command line. But what if I had one that could run in the cloud? What if I used something like Dependabot and it actually looked at my GitHub repo and automatically sent me pull requests with suggestions that I should go and update my projects? But then when I later update them myself with a tool like .NET Outdated, it says, oh, that's cool, you already did it, so it's fine. And it sends you a guilty note and then closes it. I can also use another example is NuKeeper, NuKeeper, which is .NET tool, install. And it's nice because they're so easily available. Just go and grab it. Comes down. Then I type NuKeeper. And it'll go and do the same kind of thing. And then NuKeeper can also generate pull requests and put those up into a pull request into GitHub and let me know what's going on. So there's four different choices about ways to manage your dependencies. Also, I wanted to point out when you say .NET tool list -G that I have like alt cover. Another one of my favorites is a tool called Coverlet by a guy named Tony, who is here all the way from Nigeria. And Tony hooked me up so I can go now go and run my test project. This is kind of cool. I'm doing a Selenium test here. Selenium puts your browser on a string. So I type test. I'm running my regular old .NET unit tests. I'm firing up the browser. At the very top of the browser, there's a line that says this is being controlled by an automated tool. I think that's me. And then running all of those things. And I can go and see, look, there's an issue with an H1 that's not correct, right? And then I can go and run with code coverage, find out if I need to have better coverage. And with Tony's stuff, we'll go and run code coverage and then mark which line of code is being executed and which one's not. And I'm just sitting here in Visual Studio Code. So that tool is called Coverlet, and it integrates into your build process. You've got alt cover. They'll make open cover files, and Coverlet was 2 seconds to plug into my application, all open source, and then it created these great gutters here. So there's lots of really cool innovation happening in this space. Are you ready, sir?
Let's go back to the slide, yes.
So the global tools ecosystem right now is hot, hot, hot. And if you've got a cool command line tool, that's a great opportunity for you to get that out to a bigger audience.
So let's talk about Blazor. This is one of my favorite parts of the new stuff we're building in .NET. Blazor is something that's pretty cool. What it does is today you're probably using Angular, React, Vue, some kind of client-side JavaScript framework in your applications because you can't run C# in the browser. You have to switch to JavaScript. So one of the challenges you have with these is these are more frameworks you have to learn, and these things rev at a pretty fast pace. And so what if you could take advantage of .NET in the browser? And so Blazor actually lets you write your .NET code directly in the browser. You don't have to use JavaScript. You can just write C# in the browser, and you can run it right from the browser. What's cool is with Blazor, you're going to get native performance. You're going to get the same C# performance you get on the server on the client. You can share types. You can have a C# class you share on the server, just pass it to the client, and access it with C#. It doesn't require any plugins. So when we show this Blazor stuff, you can actually run it on in Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari. You can run it on an iOS device. You can run it on an Android device. It runs on all the places. And so it's a really cool way of building .NET applications. Something we announced a few weeks ago at .NET Conf was what we call server-side Blazor. So I'm going to show two things today. I'm going to show client-side Blazor that's using something called WebAssembly. And I'm going to show using that same programming model for building your application, but we can also run it on the server. And the reason you might want to run it on the server is the WebAssembly work that we're doing will require a little bit more time for us to finish it. It's complicated to get a full .NET runtime running inside the browser. But the programming model is so awesome, we wanted you to have access to it today. So when .NET Core 3 ships, we'll have server-side Blazor built in, and you'll be able to enable the experimental client-side Blazor as well. And what I would tell a customer then is, if the client-side stuff works for you, feel free to use it, but you'll have more APIs and stuff available in the server-side Blazor.
What is the runtime going to be in the client side?
Today we're using a version of Mono,
right?
But who knows what it'll actually be. We're still trying to figure out what our WebAssembly story is. But let's do a demo, because Blazor actually is best demoed. So what I've got is I have an app here. And because I'm a .NET-y kind of guy,
I still am worried they might not have their head around what's really happening.
I'm going to show that in a second.
Okay.
So here is...
Because I think a lot of words were said.
A lot of words.
Okay.
I agree with that. Here is an app, and we all like our SPA apps. We want to use our JavaScript. We don't want to have the page refresh. Mm-hmm. And so if I click the button here, my bot changes. Now you might ask, how did I do that?
CSS.
And of course, what I'm going to say is, I've got my JavaScript called change image. It goes to the page. It looks up the bot image. And it swaps the image every time you call it. So let's go look at the source code for that page, and I'll show you what we can do with this new stuff. So here's my page. Let's kill all that junk.
That was JavaScript back there?
That's all JavaScript back there. Here's my page, and you can see that it was actually using C#.
I'm confused now.
I am too. I screwed this up really bad.
Yeah, you did. Which page was which?
Hold on. Just put it back to the way it's supposed to be.
Let me know if you want me to step over there and talk to the people.
You want to add some value, sir?
I want to add some value.
Okay, so...
Oh. Apparently not. He's ready to go.
So what I've done here is I've actually put it back the way it's supposed to be. And you can see I'm calling JavaScript here.
Java reset.
All I have here is a image displayed, and I call that JavaScript function to actually change the image. And so you get the...
I am going to take over now, sir.
The thing here. So...
What Hunter means to say is...
Hunter means to say. So let's go take this app and start changing it. Now, I'm a C# developer. I don't like the JavaScript. I like C#.
I'm non-denominational.
So let's do this. I'm just going to start here. And with Blazor, I can just write a functions block right in my page. And inside of functions, I can write C#. So the first thing I would probably do here is create a string called image URL. And I would grab this URL here, stick it here. And then I would probably write my own function in C#. And let's call it change image. And it's not going to look a lot different than the JavaScript version, but it would be something like, hey, if image URL contains like a IntelliSense is killing me.
Why don't you type that while I explain a few things? Is that cool?
Go for it.
All right. So we saw how, you know how you take C# or VB or F# and you compile it to intermediate language, IL, right? I could go out to the command line right now and I could go .NET new console and I would make a file, console app.dll. And I could go and type .NET run and it would run. I could also install Mono, which is another .NET. These are all different .NETs, instances of .NET. And I could type mono console app1.dll. And as long as it has a public static void main, it would run, right? Because Mono, the .NET Framework, and .NET Core are all instances of .NET. And they consume IL. It doesn't matter who compiled the IL, and it doesn't matter who runs the IL, as long as the underlying native bindings are there. When someone says console.writeLine, ultimately someone's going to call a Win32 API and say writeLine. Or if you're on Linux or Mac, they're going to call the equivalent underlying native API, right? If you call an API that doesn't exist, like system.drawing.bitmap, that'll work on Windows because it'll go looking for Win32 bitmap APIs, but on a Mac, it's going to need whatever the Mac does, right? What if you took all of that and put it into the browser? So console.writeLine meant the browser's console. What if you compiled a .NET runtime, one of the .NETs? Currently, we're taking Mono, which is really nice, clean, portable C code. It compiles very nicely. And really nice, clean, portable C code compiles very nicely into WebAssembly, which works just great in really any browser. And then what if you built a cool abstraction on top of that with Razor, which we already know, because we've done Razor with our MVC views all this time, and then compiled that and ran it into the browser? That's the essence of the idea behind Blazor. You write the language that you already know, with the IntelliSense you already know, with the tools you already know, writing just regular old HTML and C#. This is not Silverlight. This is not some weird, crazy runtime. It's not a plug-in. WebAssembly has happened. It has snuck up on us without us realizing it. You have this already in your browser. It works everywhere. They're shipping games with it. So this is Sanderson and Friends' exploration of what could potentially be done. You good? I got more.
Yeah, let's try this.
I'm not going to comment on your, yeah, there you go. I was worried about that. Got to get that double magic string out of there. So notice how he's just writing HTML and he's just referencing a variable in scope of the page there with image URL. Now, again, a cheesy demo because it's just, well, I can do a string replace in JavaScript or I can do a string replace in C#. But ultimately, though, it's still going to run in the browser because it's compiled to WebAssembly, and WebAssembly runs within the browser sandbox. Remember why Silverlight was made. Remember why Java was made. Remember why, what was the other one? Flash, right? They were all tiny virtual machines because we desperately wanted to have that full power inside the browser, and now we do, right? This is the assembly language of the internet that we talked about these many years ago, and now C# can compile into that.
Okay, so now
you good?
So we're good. So now run the application again.
Okay.
And now the behavior is going to be exactly the same.
Okay. Would you do a view source?
But let's do a couple things here.
Yeah.
So let's show what happens when I load the page. Now, what is this?
Zoom in. Scroll up.
What is all that?
So scroll up to the top.
What do you want to see?
No, scroll up, brother. Scroll.
You want to see
Scroll that thing.
You want to see this?
I do. Okay. Thank you. Zoom in on mono.js. So you've got a bootstrapper there for mono.js. It said not modified 304. Blazor boots up. And then it brings down mono.wasm. They took mono and they compiled it into WebAssembly. And a WASM file is just binary compiled JavaScript, right? Just think of it as that, right? And then the part that's crazy about this, right-click and give me a view source. Look at the source of this page. See how it's it? Look.
There is no source.
It's no source, but look at that. Where did that JavaScript come from?
That's in my index page.
So you're not even using that?
No.
That kind of doesn't help my demo.
If you want,
You're kind of undercutting me right there.
Let me fix Scott's demo.
It's all lies at that point.
Let me fix Scott's demo completely here. We'll go over here, and we'll just
a mess.
Just to prove we're not faking something
When you say
here.
Scott, is that me or yourself in the third person? It's your computer.
So just want to show.
Yeah, we know that
still works.
That's what I want to see. Okay?
That's the entire app.
And if you look in the network traffic, we're downloading the DLLs. Now this is important. The DLLs that are coming down aren't WASM. We didn't compile the entire app. Those are .NET standard DLLs. The browser is now .NET standard. So when you go and you see like those fun James Montemagno talks where he goes and he takes a DLL and he compiles it and it's running on Android and on iPhone, and he says, look, I've got 90% code reuse. Imagine all of the code that you could potentially, that you already have, that you have code right now that is either .NET standard or close to .NET standard. And you can move those APIs and that business logic up and run in the browser. That's the promise of this. Then, on top of that, if you look, we want to do the fetch data one? We've got 8 minutes. What are you doing, man?
I'm going to try something crazy here.
And this other stuff wasn't crazy?
I need to close the browser first, but let's close the browser out.
It's gone off the rails. I don't know what you're doing.
It's going off the rails, yes. Yeah. Let's close the browser out. Let's run that stuff.
When review times comes around, I want to point out that this was your demo.
And so let's pop this over.
Okay.
It's complaining.
What
I was going to show you is we have remote debugging as well. And I could actually debug the C# live.
Wait a second, you can actually step through C#
in
connected
Chrome.
to Chrome?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be amazing if that worked.
It was complaining. So.
Okay, so the essence of what, and this didn't work very well, I'm afraid. There may have been an error between the chair and the keyboard. And
I don't think so. Well, let's show some of these other ones, Scott. You want to see like this one? Notice I can click.
Yeah.
I can do fetch data.
Look at the code behind fetch data.
Okay. So this is interesting. Again, we're not knocking JavaScript, right? What we are saying is that you can be productive with the stuff that you already know. So if you look here, he's got a nice table with a for each. Yes, we know you can do it in Angular. That's cool. And then scroll all the way to the bottom. See how he's got forecast right there. Get JSON async, right? We're doing .NET-y type stuff. We're going to go and make an async call, pull back some JSON. We're going to deserialize it into an array of weather forecasts and throw it up into the. And notice
but it runs on the client side.
Yes, in this case I have a server project as well.
Thank you for that smattering of applause. I'm just trying to get that across. So what if it doesn't? What if you like the model? What if you like the programming model, but it doesn't run in your browser, or you're using IE or something like that? There is a thing called asm.js, which was WebAssembly, which you could potentially fall back on. It would basically be a polyfill for WebAssembly. That is an option. But to get access to something like system.drawing, right, to that low-level API that maybe doesn't exist, that suddenly you wanted to call something that is native, why not take that logic and then just remote it back to the server? So then you're doing a client-server relationship, except with location transparency. That business logic, you write it this way, the model is this way, except the Blazor logic occurs on the back end, and you just have SignalR remoting that. Now, some of the old heads in the room might say that sounds a little bit like DCOM, and it does. DCOM was the promise of location transparency, except there's 20 years of web security standards, open standards. Nothing that we're doing here isn't building on an open web standard or an open source .NET
I
product.
didn't close all the tabs, so look at the screen.
What are you doing, man?
So I've got my Blazor app,
Is that like a little mobile thing going on?
and I launched the Chrome debugger. And you'll notice that my C# code is sitting in the Chrome debugger with a breakpoint sitting inside of it.
They hook up, what's that thing called? Source maps or whatever?
Yep. Let's go over here and
So you're actually
click the button,
debugging it
paused in debugger.
in the browser. Okay, that's impressive.
Look at this. I'm stepping through the C#.
That was worth the wait. I'll give you that one. Do you understand that? This isn't the generated JavaScript because there wasn't any generated JavaScript, right? This is WebAssembly. So we're using the browser's runtime to host our runtime to host your .NET. There's an inception thing going on there, but the perf loss is linear. It's not exponential.
Is that cool or what?
Yeah. You kind of redeemed yourself a little bit.
Thank you.
All right. You have 4 minutes, sir. Do you want to talk about?
Let's show the ML.NET slide, and then maybe show the Raspberry Pi.
Okay, I guess we'll have to skip the dev stuff, the Azure DevOps.
Yes.
Okay. Machine learning. It's a good thing.
I'm not going to go deep into this because people on our team have a whole talk on this at Ignite. But we have ML.NET. ML.NET is a .NET library for building machine learning. And it's based on actual internal Microsoft tech. We have a bunch of teams inside of Microsoft, Office, Bing, whatnot, that are actually using ML and have been for years in their products using this library that was called TLC. And we've taken that library, packed it up as an API that you can use. We made it open source. We're actually integrating with third-party ML libraries as well, and that's ML.NET. I thought we'd show one more cool thing on Scott's machine is we brought a Raspberry Pi with us. We had IoT as a workload in the earlier slides that .NET can run on. And in the, So Scott's got, he's on a Raspberry Pi.
Now, I've shown you Raspberry Pi demos a little bit before. On Raspberry Pi before, I have gone to a Windows machine, said .NET New Console, and then I've installed the runtime on the Raspberry Pi, and then I've talked to you about how it wasn't possible to get the SDK running on Raspberry Pi because technical issues.
Now the SDK does run on the Raspberry Pi because we have a service in Azure called Azure IoT, and Azure IoT is built on .NET Core. And so we have versions of .NET Core that run on ARM32, so we can support those IoT workloads. And that team actually asked us to get the SDK running as well.
It's slow and it's non-trivial, particularly around restoration. And it's almost always based on the speed of your Raspberry Pi or your small device's disk, right? So anything that you can do to make it smaller, tree trimming, not including DLLs that you don't want, you can do that as much as you can. You don't want to be beating on a Raspberry Pi's disk more than you need to, certainly loading unnecessary DLLs. So this is going to load .NET Hello World, but Hello World is lame. So instead, I've got a ASP.NET application running. And this is on this Raspberry Pi running through his portable travel router at 10.10.12.5000. And I've written about this extensively on my blog as well. This is a small example, which is not super interesting. It's not fun to look at that. But it is cool to be able to Google yourself later with Bing. And I would recommend that you check this out. It turns out Raspberry Pis are fantastic Docker hosts. It's even faster to go and use Docker on a Raspberry Pi. So sure, check it out. The .NET SDK runs on that. But Docker runs great on a Raspberry Pi, and you can go and have the best of both worlds. And I got my entire podcast application running on a Raspberry Pi. I walk you step by step through it. We now have extensive samples. And Peter Marcoux on our team has put together some GPIO bindings so you can flash LEDs and talk to devices. And if you want to see a really, really amazing demo, take a look at the .NET Conf session, .NET Conf with Cam Soper. He went and did a talk at .NET Conf 2018 where he talked about this and did a live demo, showed you the breadboard, did it all in .NET, and then talked to devices and IoT. And then, of course, you could plug that into Azure or do whatever makes you happy. It's pretty amazing that we've got that working.
So switch back to me. Let's show one more thing real quick. Has anybody heard about Visual Studio Live Share? Few hands.
How do you not know about that?
That's why I want to show this. So
Killing me.
I'm in Visual Studio, and maybe I'm confused. I'm struggling. I need some help.
That would never happen to you, sir.
And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go chat Hanselman up, and I'm going to pass him a link.
So he sends me a link, and I'm going to just click on it, and then now he's in Visual Studio, and I'm in Visual Studio Code, and it says signing in, and it says joining, and I'm looking at nothing right now, and now suddenly
Switch to your machine.
I'm over here.
So notice that he's in VS Code, and he can do whatever he wants. Now go back to me, because it's better when you see me.
I'm confused.
And so
that's you.
on me, as he moves around, notice the word Scott Hanselman's moving through my source code. So the cool thing about this is I could have a huge project on my machine. I don't have to go put it in source control somewhere. I don't have to zip the stuff up to him. He basically can see my entire project. We can see each other. We can both type at the same time. So while he's going, I could come down here and do my thing. He can set breakpoints in the app if he wants.
I can.
Go put a breakpoint up there. So it's a great way if you're coding and you want to have somebody help you code or show a bug or debug something.
So I just hit F5, and it said the host doesn't allow starting the debugger. Ask your buddy to enable it. Go ahead and hit the debugger for me. Hit F5.
Yep.
So on my machine, I just got the output. I'm watching the build happen right now on Visual Studio Code, and now I can then step over. So think about this. Think about all the time you've spent pushing pixels. Remember earlier when I gave you a hard time about taking a photograph of a URL? Why are we sharing 4K monitors in order to share text? I can do this while I'm tethered my phone at a cafe, McDonald's, and using really low bandwidth, I can have that great experience. Additionally, check this out. I want you all to install this and try it out. You can install the Visual Studio Live Share audio plugin as well.
And talk.
And talk inside of Visual Studio Code and experience this whole thing without having, and then you can have up to, I think, 5 or 10 people. You can mark it read-only if you're teaching classes. You can have everyone connect to your session and then mark it read-only. And then if someone has a question, they can select the code and they can say, I have a question about this.
All you got to do
absolutely amazing.
Just Bing or Google Visual Studio Live Share. It'll take you to the page with the plugin, install the plugin, and you can do exactly what Scott and I were just showing on stage.
All right. Thank you very much.